This is going to be a Tatas Tuesday where I just try to rip through this and hope it makes sense because there's so many things. I'm talking, of course, about all things Beyoncé at the Grammys and how it sort of can be a learning experience for all the shenanigans in the gaming industry. And the lesson of Beyoncé for the gaming industry is Beyoncé is a woman of color with zero fucks to give. Pardon the swears, but this is important regarding the various controversies regarding depictions of women in gaming. Because one of the things that drives me nuts is that you have the critics who, as far as anybody can tell, have not actually attempted to put themselves front and center in a way that is designed to be looked at first and foremost, commenting on women and depictions of women who do. And it's one of the few, specialties where you don't have to have any experience with the subject to talk about the subject. And this is what drives me crazy. And the problem is that the minute a woman decides to embrace any element of her cultural background or her sexuality, because the two things are usually linked, everything goes sideways. And for some reason, some people cannot see a woman as anything but sexual the minute she decides to embrace the sexual part of her being. And that is not the woman's fault. That is the fault of the people reducing her via sexuality. And so I love that Beyoncé is making it her own. For people who don't know what she's kind of doing here, no, this is not the Virgin Mary, even though the headpiece could be seen as similar. This is an African demi-deity known as an Orisha, and specifically Oshun. She wasn't just showing skin for the sake of skin. She is embodying an African deity. And there are actually images that are closer with the headpiece in this. They did this for the chainmail bikini. The symbolism with the yellow and the running water and all this stuff, it's all through Beyonce's Lemonade stuff. It's loaded even within the Afro-Caribbean community because, this is the equivalent of somebody showing up at the Grammys and dressing up like, I'm trying to think of an equivalent because there really isn't one, but say the Virgin Mary or the Pope, and that's always somewhat controversial, right? This is less controversial in the mainstream for the religious symbolism because most people don't know who the heck Oshun is. She is sharing her culture. She is sharing a symbol with the rest of the world. And I think it's crazy important that she takes this risk and she does something that is meaningful to her. And she is using the symbols and traditions of her background, not having to borrow from white society and dye her hair platinum blonde and basically all these beauty myths that come from the epitome of white people, blonde, blue-eyed white women. And she did that for a lot of years. She played that game. Now she doesn't have to. And I think it's great. Of course, in video games, this would be seen as an exoticized minority. And this is the problem with slapping these labels on things. Beyoncé wants to share this element of her culture with us. She should be able to, without being told she's somehow doing something wrong. The history here, entire communities were completely uprooted and forcibly relocated to North America through the slave trade, or the Caribbean and then to North America, hence Afro-Caribbean diaspora. This is a painful part of the past of a certain subculture or subcultures in America. And this is something a lot of people don't know about. And this has always been a thing for me about demonizing sexuality in video games, because that is a very white colonial tradition, oh, sex is bad. Because if you go back to these faiths, sex is all over the place. I mean, even in the Old Testament, there's sex all over the place. It is very much a Eurocentric, Puritan, sex negative approach to go, oh, sexualized woman equals bad. And this makes, I don't want to say demonizes, because that happened to these traditions in a more literal way. That our Christian influenced, heavily influenced morality does not allow us space for these cultural traditions to flourish in art without it being a discussion of, oh, Beyoncé wore a metal bikini at the Grammys. I mean, this really undermines the theories of a lot of so-called feminists, doesn't it? And part of the big complaint among non-white feminists is that they try to say what's right for all women using the framework of white European sensibilities, which of course are leaning towards the prudish side. And so Beyoncé has done something incredibly subversive by using her, unique experience as a woman of a certain non-white cultural descent. And this is what I think is amazing. And this is what I think game developers should take notice of and listen to. Tell your story. And if people claim your story is offensive, don't give a fuck. Be like Beyoncé. Don't give a fuck. These are the stories you love. These are the stories you identify with. Go for it. I mean, this is all of hip-hop music, R&B, all this stuff, but especially hip-hop. Hip-hop carries one message to the white suburbs and another message to the black inner cities. But I understand the cultural sensitivity towards somebody dressing up like God. Essentially, that is dicey territory. And this gets into the artist's right to offend. The artist's right to offend should be, pardon the pun, sacrosanct. And it's so strange to me that the same people who claim video games are art, as opposed to video games are abstract toys, or shocker, video games are games, the very people who subscribe to the theory of video games as art want to take away the artist's right to produce offensive content. And then I look to Beyoncé, and Beyoncé has no fucks to give, and I say, game developers, be like Beyoncé, have no fucks to give. Don't apologize for tackling potentially offensive content. Do it knowingly, and say some of the greatest art ever created was subversive and therefore potentially offensive. Michelangelo painted church ceilings, and the whole deal was apparently he got paid in advance, because if they didn't like it, too bad. They were paying for a Michelangelo. They weren't paying for veto power. And this is super, 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 super important if we want to get over this, I forget what Ollie Barter calls it, but it's basically an inferiority complex to films. Because films will go out there and be super controversial. Music will go out there and be super controversial. But game developers, oh, we don't want to offend anyone. I think that when you make an album like Lemonade, and if you're a game developer, this is important for you as well. You don't do it to win awards. You make it so that the people who will connect with it will really connect with it, will have a great experience. And this is what Grand Theft Auto does. Grand Theft Auto, like Beyoncé, has no fucks to give. And you may love Grand Theft Auto, you may hate Grand Theft Auto. No one is making you play Grand Theft Auto. And can you imagine if these same people went after Beyoncé with the same trying to tell her what to make? And if you believe that video games are art, you should have as few fucks to give as Beyoncé, meaning 0 fucks to give. And, even if you do think there could be a so-called negative influence, this is people having free will. And These are not games that children should be playing. These are not games that are meant to be sold to children. There are clear warning labels all over this thing. And if your kid is interested in games beyond their, biological age, good for you. You've raised a precocious child. Engage with them and try to find some things, find out why they like these things. It could possibly be because they're just bored with kiddie games. They want something more challenging. Kids are sponges, and kids are absorbing media outside of video games. And guess what, guys? They have questions. I'd like Beyonce's declaration, for lack of a better term, to be the final word. It's not gonna be. I would love it if it was. But maybe it's at least a start that we dare to question these, it's an exoticized minority, because yes, these are non-Western symbols. When it becomes less othered, it is no longer exotic. If we're not allowed to make characters at all exotic, then they're just going to be freaking boring, and they're going to be white, or they might as well be. Like when you have these interchangeable characters where race is not relevant, that can sometimes be cool in the right setting. But when you're in a big fantasy realm and everything is bigger than life, you want that sizzle, you want that magic, you want that wow, because Game of Thrones is just, exoticized European traditions. It is medievalist fantasy. And so all this idea of shunning the exoticized minority does is stamp out the ability for people from other cultures to play in this sandbox too. And it's important not to see people as savages, but I don't think anybody sees Beyonce as a savage. I think Beyonce is, because she was seen as, urban music Barbie for so long, she's uniquely positioned to do this and have it be a moment instead of seen as just a stunt or ignored, or, that's weird, she dressed like a gold Statue of Liberty, what is that? And I think there's a lot of Western myopia, there's a lot of Western tunnel vision in the analysis of video games now, and what might be objectification to one person is seen as a declaration of a sexual history to another. For a lot of people, it's very important to see their own experiences in media. And you can't do that if those experiences are seen as inherently dirty. So let's get more Beyoncés and more Rihannas and more Nicki Minaj's and more Katy Perry's and more Lady Gaga's and more Metallica's and more, what's another guy? I'm trying to think, a guy who does like wild out there stuff. Blanking on it for now, but you know what I mean, like a Robert Smith or something like that. And let's get those stories told, from an insider perspective. And let's, embrace culture. Let's immerse ourselves in these reclaimed cultures the same way we immerse ourselves in space operas and in, medievalist game worlds. Because you know what? We've played those already. We've played all those already, and they're good, and we like them, and we'll play them again, but we're open to different things as well. And if it seems like a natural artistic expression of self, people will not say it's pandering, people will not say it's politically correct, because it's going to feel organic in the game world. And so I'm going to stop there. Hopefully that made sense. I think it's cool despite the potential offensiveness. I think a little bit of offense is good because it challenges. But yeah, I'd love to see moments like this in gaming. And we don't get them because everyone's too afraid. And that is absolutely to our detriment.